So, here we go again. Round 7, is it?
Yes.
All right, what's the deal? What do you want?
What do you want from me?
What do you want from me?
What do we want from each other? Okay, so today the topic of the fear of being alone or the fear of being disliked has been raised kind of like over the last 24 hours. It's popped up for a couple of people in the community. And
Is this a communal problem, is it?
seems to be a large problem overall for people, the fear of being alone.
It's a shared concern.
Yeah. You know, we're creatures that want to be together and connect and feel loved. But a lot of the time behind that there's this fear of being alone. So there's manipulation that comes into play and controlling that comes into play.
Naughty.
Yes. I've seen it in myself today.
All right, so what's the question, first of all? Is there a question?
Well,
or you just want to consider the topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to go into the topic of the fear of being alone, kind of where that comes from. Where does it stem from?
Where do you want to start?
Well, why is it necessary to be okay with being alone?
What do you do? How do you define alone? What does that mean?
Like we were talking today, if you were to go off on your own and you were to be alone, would you be okay with...
So physically having no other people around?
Physically alone, yeah.
Okay.
Would you be able to propel your life in a direction that you want it to go in if you were alone? Or is the fear of being alone, does that come from not feeling like you would be able to take control of your life and direct it in the direction that you want it to go in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where do you want to begin? Be clear. There's 100 things that can be said on it. So if you give me a starting point, then we'll just see what comes out.
Okay. Why is it necessary for people who want to inquire into a path to learn how to be alone?
When you say a path, do you mean a path towards peace?
Yeah, towards peace, freedom, deeper understanding of life.
Okay. So why is it necessary for somebody who's interested in cultivating peace and realizing peace or finding peace to learn how to be physically alone?
Yeah, or to overcome their fear of being alone.
Of being alone. Well, the path of peace is all about knowing yourself, or rather, which is the nature of self, which is the nature of life, which is the nature of experience, which is truth. To know truth, the truth about your life, about life, leads to peace. They go hand in hand because they're the same thing. So clearly, that means one must endeavour to explore the total picture of one's life, the whole of it. How could you possibly know the truth of your life if there are parts of it that you're afraid of looking at? then clearly you can never find peace, because there's always a shadow. There's always a corner of experience that you refuse to go into. So you can't have total peace. You can't uncover total truth if that's the way you go. So when it comes to being physically alone, with no other people around you, no sense of another, because there's one thing to make very clear. If you're alone, physically alone in an environment, but you're sitting there on your phone watching a video that somebody else has made, you're not alone. You're not even physically alone. You know? If you're reading a book that somebody else wrote, you're not physically alone. So to be physically alone in an environment, in a physical environment, means that your attention and awareness can no longer be distracted by another being. Which means that the core of your own experience can come into view. And without getting too technical on the language here, we'll just try to keep it simple. What you think is yourself is your body and brain. And so to be alone with your body and brain, without distraction, without other people imposing ideas upon you, is absolutely essential to know deeply the nature of your body and brain. You think that is yourself, and so you start there. You start with what you think you are. And you look very deeply into what you think you are. Now you will realize eventually from that deep inquiry that you're not the body and the brain. But that's further down the track. If, when you are alone, physically alone, so there's no one else around, the brain starts to produce thoughts, feelings, memories, emotions that generate anxiety and fear and cause you to want to go and find somebody else, then you have a problem. It means you're able to be alone up to a certain point, but then fear takes over. Anxiety, paranoia, guilt takes over and causes you to go running to find another person. Now it's a very deep truth that to be alone inwardly is a way inward. So that means when you spend time in very quiet, undistracted observation of your body and your brain, you go very deeply inward. If you pierce through the body and the brain, you arrive at mind, which is the energy of life, the substance of life, the consciousness of life, which is behind the body and the brain, where you go when you die. So there's a whole level of your consciousness in there to get to, which you just won't be able to explore. You won't be able to fully encounter if, when you get to the point of more of a, like you've been practicing aloneness for a while, but then fear comes up and anxiety comes up and guilt comes up and makes you run back to another person, the experience of being around or with another being, another person, or just another being. You will only be able to go so far inward. And if it's a barrier to your peace that you don't know what's in there, then you have no choice but to overcome the barrier. You have no choice but to ignore the fears and the anxieties and the emotional, whatever manipulation, whatever the consciousness is doing to get you to run back to another being. Then you have no choice but to ignore that and continue going inward. Which means facing the fear. if being deeply alone in a kind of meditative environment leads you into experiences, let's say the doorway to mystical states, certain types of mystical experiences, deep states of mind, whereby your consciousness begins to think it's going to die. And in that fear of dying, it's imagining all the people that it's going to leave behind and what they're going to think and how they're going to feel. And all of the promises you made and all the things that you said and how those people love you and how sad they're going to be. And if that happens and you respond to it, then you will only go so far inward. If being deeply alone causes you to face the reality of, and this is why it's tricky, a little bit tricky to speak about aloneness, because it's really an illusion. It's really an illusion. But what we're talking about here is breaking through the barrier of this illusion. If this illusion is sustained in your life, if you have not seen the illusion of aloneness, that there really is no such thing, actually, as aloneness. If you have not seen that, then you set your sights upon breaking through the barrier of the illusion of aloneness, which is what you fear. What you fear is an illusion. But to penetrate that barrier, you must embrace the illusion. You must see through the illusion. And you can only do that by fully accepting aloneness. At which point you go deeply into consciousness. Which means you face death. The illusion of death. You face it. Okay, so where do you want to go from there? Where does that lead you to?
Well, like, why do people have this fear, this deep fear of being alone? Where does that come from?
Where does it come from? Life really loves itself. It loves everything that it is. It loves everything that it has. It loves everything that it has created, and it doesn't want to let it go.
Okay.
Fear of aloneness is fear of non-existence. Fear that there will be nothing. Life brings itself into being as form, as things, as experience, as relationship. And it loves that. And it doesn't want there to be nothing. And it thinks if it lets everything go, there will be nothing. So it doesn't want to let go. But it has to let go to have peace. The deepest kind of peace, in which there is nothing. Not an atom of concern exists in that peace, and it craves that. Of all the stress and worry and concern of being, of having to be, it just wants a break. as well. But it fears that if it lets everything go, there will be nothing. That's why.
So that manifests into the humanity.
Of course, it's life everywhere. Every atom.
And so for us, it looks like the fear of being alone, which is really the fear of it all ending, not being recognized, not existing.
If you've played a video game for 50 years and you've invested 50 years of your life into that game, you have a kingdom, an empire, children, properties, riches. You've invested all of this time into this creation. You could potentially fear that that game will be turned off and it will all have amounted to nothing. Maybe you haven't experienced that before. Maybe you can't remember the end of the game. And you don't know what happens afterwards. And so you don't want it to end. You've spent all this time building this up. So you fight to keep the game alive. But it can't stay on forever. The servers are being shut down, you know. So you have no choice but to let go. Eventually you have to. Which is why those who are interested in cultivating peace, don't ignore that. Do you know what happens when you die? Do you remember? Because if you did, you would realize, you would remember that there is nothing to be worried about. Okay, the process of dying can be painful, stressful. You leave this body behind. You leave the material gatherings behind. But there is a deeper reality behind the body and the material gatherings that you can't lose, because that's what you return to. So if you're out of touch with what that is, if you can't remember what that is, perhaps you have become so lost that you believe there is nothing after death. Then your consciousness will be fearful of that non-existence. But there is no such thing. Were you to die fully and go back, you would see that you are still there. Even in the formless abyss, you are there. So there is no death for the spirit. And the spirit, even as a body, in any world that you're in, you are the spirit. You are not the body. You always have been the spirit. So you don't really die. But life, that spirit, loves its creation. It loves itself. And with that love, attachment, with that desire to keep going, we have built up such a wonderful life. We have built such a wonderful world here. I don't want it to end with that comes the sadness, the grief. So I don't go that way. I freely give this life. I give it to you. You have it. You have it. I don't want to hold on to it. It's too painful. And I remind you, we will have to part ways. Remember that. You will go your own way. And I help you to remember that so that it's less painful when it happens. And I remind myself, I'm here for a little while. This is not my world. I don't own this. This is not my body. This is not me. I'm a visitor, and I don't forget that. And I regularly visit death. So I don't have a problem with it. I don't fear being alone. It's very relaxing. It's very free. It's very unconcerned. It's very undisturbed. I embrace it. I have to. Because I want to live in peace. And I want to live with peace. And peace is my deepest self. My deepest experience of myself is peace. That's wonderful. Why would I run from that? Of course I can't. So that's it.
So we were talking around the campfire last night about true peace. Do you need to know what happens after death to know true peace?
You need to know what death is to have true peace.
To have true peace. Right.
True peace can only come when you have a total awareness. Total awareness contains life and death. And by total awareness, that means since awareness is non-physical, awareness which is untouched, awareness can't be influenced by matter. It is like the sky. This is an ancient analogy. It is like the clear sky containing the clouds. At no point do the clouds ever touch the sky. They are contained within it. At no point do the clouds impact the sky. They don't change the nature of the sky. They are contained within the sky. And the clouds come into being and form, and then they dissolve, and the sky is there regardless, totally untouched, unmoved. So a total awareness means one has and does witness. One has witnessed and one does witness the coming into being of life and matter. What is identified as life, a being, a consciousness coming into being. And a dissolving, a total dissolving of the consciousness. A coming into being and then a ceasing. A coming and a going. Which reveals the origin of life. Which manifests through different states of mind. Not physical locations. Life didn't come from somewhere. Life, all of life and death, Consciousness is a state of mind, and that is all there is. But there are various experiences of states of mind within consciousness. And one example of that is, like, it's a different experience of life to be a shark than it is to be an ant. It's a different experience of life to be a tree as it is a person. But all of those states are contained within life. So when one has witnessed the coming into being of the content of mind, mind itself, not a state of mind, but one has seen all states of mind dissolve and all states of mind come into being within mind, then one knows what happens at the peak of life and at the bottom of life. A modern language that you could use in order to explain this is, you know what happens when the universe ends. And you know what caused the universe to come into being because you have seen it, you know it intimately within your own mind, within your own consciousness. You know this. It is not possible to have true peace until this is known. Any other kind of peace is a temporary manifestation which is conditioned. You have peace because certain conditions have been met. Mm-hmm. But to know the nature of the sky behind the clouds, the conditioned kind of peace is like the clouds are light and fluffy. It's lovely. It's lovely for everyone. But then the clouds turn heavy, very heavy and grey and dark, and produce lightning and tremendous rain and floods. So where is your peace now? If you are the sky, you are the same. For the floods and for the lightness, the heaviness and the lightness behind that apparent duality is a unified, equanimous, meaning equal, awareness. That is peace. That awareness is peace. Peaceful and peace. So if you are that, the state of the body, the brain, the psychology, the movements of it all is irrelevant, whether it's up or down, in or out. The body gets frustrated, tense, anxious, stressed, or relaxed, friendly, kind, happy. It doesn't touch that kind of peace. That peace is always behind whatever state the body is in. That's true peace. Which is why, anyone who's contacted this knows the way into it. They know that as the body and brain grasps more at experience and existence, its own existence, tension and stress amounts from that. And if that is released and relaxed, as that relaxation happens, the body becomes lighter again, and one's attention and experience returns to a total awareness, which is experienced as a return to peace. Anyway, I don't know why I said that, but that's what you see. And that's why, because that's why the great mystics and masters of old, and today, they are like physicians, doctors, healers. As if they prescribe the antidote to your suffering. You have a grasping, fearful, anxious mind. Okay, we'll turn it around and return as a prescription. Here is a medicine, a form of medication, which is a meditation, which is meditation. Meditation is the medication for mankind going forward. Believe it or not. No, that wasn't the right thing to say. Believe it. Meditation is the meditation is the medication for mankind going forward. It is the truth. To return mankind to a total peace. Meditation is it. That is the medication. And they materialize that way. The teachers, the guides, the masters, they materialize that way because, well, that's the truth of life. What we're describing here, the journey into suffering, the way out of suffering, the Buddha's Four Noble Truths in his example, and Jesus' 10 Commandments is another example. They're a path laid down to help somebody reconnect with the truth of their life and life itself. And so because they are that realization, these teachers, these guides, they are that realization embodied. That is why they speak the same. They all talk about the same thing. They're all professing the same instruction or the same suggestion or the same truth spoken, because it's the same thing that you arrive back at. It's one. The reality is one. It's just that the complexity of the illusion is multiplicity. Duality, each side of the duality also splits itself into two, you know? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And it's infinitely complex in that direction. Okay?
Okay, so when you talk about meditation, there's obviously sitting and meditating, but you talk a lot about focus and attention and presence and to be cultivating that 24 hours a day. So can you go into that? Can you kind of go more into the instruction, like where is your focus?
Okay.
The other day I had one day of training where every time you noticed that I was not focused, you would go, where is your focus? And it really makes you realize that your focus is all over the place. So can you go into that for people? Because obviously a lot of people here might be meditators and be meditating, but I don't know if people know that the goal of that is to be cultivating a presence that lasts 24 hours a day type thing.
Okay. So you want to consider meditation. Is that right? You want to consider what meditation is, what it's for, how to do it? Or was your question more something else?
So for people who want to be, I guess, going deeper, then you know, they may sit down, meditate for an hour, and then go on with their day, and there's no focus or presence or awareness or attention in that day, except for when they sit down and meditate for an hour. Whereas the objective of the path is to maintain that focus and presence throughout the day.
It's not the objective, it's an objective. To learn how to focus. Well, let's just consider meditation and it'll probably answer the question.
Okay. Cool.
So meditation is all about watching. What is watching? When you are looking directly at life, when you are watching life directly, life itself, that is not an egotistical perspective. The world, the earth, the body, the breath, all of the creatures of the world, the earth, are not your ego. There is life happening, unfolding, evolving, infinitely everywhere. Human beings have confused their identity with the ego. You actually are all of that life. You're everything, everywhere, all at once. Right now, you are that. But human beings have confused that true identity of life, true life, with what's going on inside the brain. Meditation is the tool with which one learns to re-identify reality, the unfoldment of reality, which is the true identity of life. So through watching, which is meditation, through learning to watch what is present here, one clearly sees, one arrives at a place where one clearly sees that there is an egoic identity of a self which is completely contained in the brain, which is one little sliver of the totality of life, and that those two things are not separate, that the ego is contained in the brain, and the brain is contained in the body, and the body is contained in the world, and the world contains everything, including the body and the brain and the ego, and the world is contained in a greater life. Meditation is for that, awakening to that reality. So if you're watching where you are, what is present? What is presently happening here? What are you observing? If a bird suddenly flies into the side of your head, buff, on your temple, you say, I experienced pain, as if I am the body and the body experienced pain. Your ability to experience pain, like that particular pain at that time, was totally dependent on the existence of the bird. So your body, the experience of pain, started off over there as a bird flying towards this body, and then it hit the body, and then pain came up. Why don't you identify as the bird? So, anyway, when you're watching closely, which is what meditation is for, you will discern at some point, you will discern what is the ego, because that's where all the problems are. You know, why do we place so much emphasis on the ego in this way of cultivation? Because that's where all of the issues are. With the identity of the ego, the illusory identity of the self contained in the brain that thinks it's an individual, which has all of the problems, takes everything personally, and thinks that it's going to die. That's the source of so much conflict. And so the thing that sustains that is feeding it all the time, believing it, going along with it, the egoic interpretation of life. Outside of the ego is an awareness of a total oneness, which dissolves the cause of war and everything that leads to war. Life is experienced truly, intimately, outside of the ego. And so to discern what the ego is and what is not ego is paramount. In fact, that's the first realization to aim at. That's the first realization to cultivate. There's a whole world of cultivation that exists after that. To know the enlightened nature, the already enlightened nature of life, and to see the illusion of the ego and how it operates and why it's there, how it came into being. I mean, you live from there after that onwards. You live there. You live intimately as one in life, going forward, growing, evolving, unfolding together. So meditation is for that. It's for establishing that perspective, establishing that viewpoint, not intellectual viewpoint, not conceptual viewpoint, but actual perspective, the standpoint as to where you look at life from. So when we close our eyes and we do this kind of meditation, where we sit, we watch the body and we watch the breath, and we tune into present experience, that reveals something about the nature of mind and body and intellect inwardly, because those things come into focus. Our attention is no longer so focused on external appearances, and instead the focus has turned inward, into the body, into the psychology, more deeply, into the energy of presence, which is a manifestation of mind, energy. Mind governs energy. So by tuning into the energy of presence, one can learn about the nature of mind. So this kind of sitting, eyes closed meditation is for looking inward. But when your eyes are open, you're still looking at life. When you're breathing, when you're walking, when you're interacting and engaging in the body, it's still the same life, but your focus is more environmental and relational to other beings and other things. Whereas with the eyes closed, it's more of the inward dimension of being. Of course, you have to explore it all. To know the nature of self, mind, reality, there can be no corner that you won't go into. You have to know everything. How can you have a total awareness of what you are if there's a bit of you that you won't look at? And if, when you are alone and you close your eyes, because you're no longer engaging with other bodies, other people, there is a shifting that takes place at certain levels of focus. After you've focused for extended periods of time, there's a shifting that happens that can kind of trigger the psychology in a certain way. The sense of an identity which you have for a long time, the ego, can trigger the ego in certain ways that make it gets worried, it gets scared. It starts gripping and grasping at its experience and wants to come back, wants you to open your eyes. It's almost as if it's going to die, is how it will feel. And that happens when you're deeply alone. As in physically alone, you've spent time, eyes closed, going inward, where there is nobody else in there with you. And so that is something that has to be overcome, it has to be penetrated. My own teacher, the way he explained it was, he said, you have to die once. and that means fully go beyond the ego's fear of death. You only have to do that once. And once you have witnessed that, what happens there, once you have witnessed that, there is now no more, the ego will never have the ability to hold you again for too long. Should you, even after that, fall into a kind of egotistical state, you will settle it soon after through the inward diving inward. And the ego might rise up with fear and doubts and you won't respond because you have seen through it once fully before. So at that point, it's a case of exploration of consciousness itself. When you go into the essence of mind itself, which is awareness, which is everywhere, one's experience of life is everywhere. What that means for you is you could put this body down to sleep and dissolve your attachment to it, and you could pop out in a different part of life somewhere else, because you're everything. You are the formless awareness which surrounds every atom, penetrates every atom. In fact, every atom is a manifestation of that formless awareness. The form is the formless. It's a manifestation of the formless. And so, because your nature is formless, truly, you are all form everywhere. And at that point, you're everything and you're everywhere all at once. And you can't die. You know you can't die. But you also know the forms are temporary. Anyway, without getting too conceptual around it, the experience of it is where it's at. That's the primary importance, is to cultivate one's own intimate awareness of this truth, the truth of one's own being. And the fear of being alone is a tremendous barrier to that. Now, as I've just explained, it's a barrier. It will stop you from going deep. However, let's consider the reality of aloneness very briefly. And it's not, maybe not too wise to dwell on this kind of thing, because the ego will conceptually grasp at what we're about to talk about. And here's, again, very briefly, one of the errors that a lot of modern inquirers make in their groups that they talk to themselves in. What we're about to talk about here is the truth of the illusion of aloneness, of how aloneness is an illusion. Now, if your ego grasps at that, it will come to the conclusion that you don't need to meditate. You don't need to look into this, because aloneness is an illusion, so there's really nothing to realize. That's the egotistical interpretation of what we're about to talk about. So be cautious of that. To fully establish and awaken the insight within oneself is necessary. That is what will change your life. To just conceptually grasp at what somebody else is saying and then turn that into an egotistical insight via understanding is not going to do anything for you. And if you keep that established, it will become a barrier to your own ability to meditate, because your ego will convince you that you don't need to meditate. Anyway, with that said, what is alone? What does that mean? What does it mean? The physical body is alone. Well, it's never alone. Just because you can't hear all of the people that live in the town around you doesn't mean they're not there. The pencil that you're, even if you went to sit in your van alone, you didn't build the van. You didn't make the pencil. You didn't make the paper. Somebody else made that. So there's other people still in your life. Where are you ever alone? If you go to live in a cave on your own, naked, well, you didn't make this body. Mum and Dad did. So what is alone? To be self-contained in one's experience means the senses are independent. The sensation of touch, the sensation of sight, which is a sensation, hearing, tasting. These things are operating on their own. They are independently sensing the world. That's self-contained. Now, the sensation can touch another body physically. What does that have to do with you or me? Sensation. Sensation is independent. The body feels that whether you want to or not. That is alone. It's operating by itself. The whole of the interaction of the senses with the world is self-operating. Self. Self-contained experience with no other. It is alone already, together, with all of the forms within it. It is alone. You can't ever change that. You can't do anything about it. It has always been that way. It will always be that way. And you fear being alone? Then you fear the essence of life. That's a route to insanity. To be afraid of what you interpret as being alone. First of all, that aloneness doesn't exist. But the reality of life, it is one. What does one mean? No other. But don't grasp at what you think no other means, because you will think that means that there's no one else. That's what your ego will interpret that way. I'm here and there's no one else. No. Life is one. It has always been one. It will always be one as multiplicity, intimate with itself. It is that. It's always been what it is. Call it alone, call it together, call it alone together. Don't even call it anything. You don't have to call it anything, because it doesn't really have a name, you know. Anyway, what it is what it is. Okay, I don't know, where do you want to go with that? To realize aloneness, let's say, to realize the true nature of life, meditation. If you want to know what an apple is, go and find an apple. Pick it up, hold it in your hand, look at it. If you want to know for yourself what it is, pick it up, look at it, sniff it, bite it, pull it apart if you have to. Look into its nature. Contemplate the object. But what is the true object of meditation? Life. Your life. You want to know what you are. Then contemplate that object. At the root of your life is this direct experience. All of the experiences you have ever had, all of the thoughts you have ever had, all of the emotions you have ever had, all of the sensations that have ever arisen within your life have happened directly here. And you want to know what this is, what this life is, what you are, then you have to stay here, spend time here. Hold this as the object of your meditation. And you will, its nature will reveal itself to you as witness, as observer. You will see what it is. You will know directly what it is. Nobody will have to tell you anything. So, are you paying attention? Are you watching? Are you seeing into this? And this is not conceptual. Body, breath, thought, energy of life, beings, bodies, earth. That's not conceptual. That is direct experience. That is relationship with direct experience. So if you're spending a lot of time there looking, then you will see for yourself. What do you need to follow somebody for? What do you need to be told what it is? Nothing wrong with having a conversation about it, for one thing. That's fine. But don't expect somebody else to give you the answer to what this is, you know? Somebody can give you a magnifying glass. Here, take mine. I've been using this for a long time. It's very good. Look at it. Look closely. You'll see. Zoom in. Tune in. What do you want me to tell you for? You know, nobody's here to follow anyone. It's not a religion. Nobody's a guru here. Anyway, now what?
So you were talking earlier about the senses, and I recently was hitting a barrier with my meditation where I kind of got to the point where I was really focusing on my senses and I couldn't get past that. So if people have been meditating for a while and they're focusing on their senses, how do they go beyond that when they're hitting that barrier? Does that make sense? Does that make senses?
I mean, it would be probably pretty specific. What do you mean by getting stuck? What do you mean by getting stuck at the senses? Is that what you said? You couldn't go beyond the senses.
Yeah, I couldn't go beyond the senses. I didn't realize there was... It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But do your best.
Like...
You have arrived at the senses. Now what?
Yeah.
What?
So...
What happens then?
Well, I didn't know how to go beyond that. So I'd get to the senses and I'd hear a cow moo. And then that cow's eating the grass that comes from the earth that I'm standing on.
That's conceptual. Don't leave the mooing. That would be a form of contemplation, what you just said there.
Right.
To contemplate the interconnectedness of life, one might do that. Hear a cow mooing and then begin to contemplate and visualize the cow is eating the grass is on the earth is connected to the trees, you know? That would be a contemplation. That's not meditation. Meditation is don't leave the mooing. Moo. That's meditation.
I don't know how to properly ask the question. Like I was getting...
Stop now. Can you still hear the cow mooing? Sensation. Sound. You got stuck on the cow. The cow is still mooing. Right now in your ears. You would have to leave this sound, the direct witnessing of the sound. You would have to leave that to begin to expect something else to be happening. Don't leave the mooing of the cow. What is the sound of one cow mooing? To expect something to happen there is another thought. You have no idea what's going on there. You would have to use knowledge that says, okay, when I hear that sound, I'm expecting it to happen, and that's knowledge. Knowledge from a past, probably grasping at what somebody else once said once upon a time or what you read in a book. That's knowledge. That's not going to take you anywhere. But if you stay with the cow mooing, the sound, which is still happening right now, that sound can take you across the whole universe. Literally, the very atoms that you're tuning into there originated in the sun. this closest star, and that originated from somewhere, some other element of life further back in time. So by tuning into that, which is actually happening, you're traveling through space and time. But you keep leaving it and then interpreting it psychologically, expecting it to become something or to be something. That's the focus. Learn to focus. So you hit the senses. The senses, fantastic. You've arrived at the senses. Stay at the senses. The way this tends to materialize in one's personal experiences is very slow and gently. It evolves, it transforms. One arrives at the senses, one might be at the senses for a long time, and you won't yet identify that actually there's been a very, very, very subtle thing been going on the whole time. My teacher used to talk to me a lot about chi cultivation. Like to cultivate chi, like they used to get these old phone books in England, the yellow pages. You get them out here? Mm-hmm. Big fat things like this that are yellow and they have the most ultra thin paper you've ever seen in your life. Well, imagine every time you do 10 breaths or 100 breaths of chi, you're folding one paper over. Then you do another 10 breaths or 100 breaths. One more page. You can hardly notice it. It doesn't make a sound. But after a few years, you've got a phone book. And this arriving at the senses in meditation can be very similar. It can be hard to detect the very subtle changes and shifts that are going on there for you. But eventually there will be a big insight in that space. So it's a case of focus. Maintain it. Keep turning away from it. It's happening right now. Why aren't you still tuned in directly to the senses? Instead, you keep interpreting psychologically with the sixth sense. You keep psychologically interpreting what's happening. Does that touch upon the question?
Yeah. Yeah. But also, once you arrive at the senses, how do you go beyond them?
It goes beyond itself. If you can stay, once you arrive at the senses, if you can stay at the senses, it'll go beyond itself.
So you just have to maintain the focus.
Exactly.
On the senses.
Yeah.
Or on the thing that is watching the senses.
Are they two different things? The watching of the senses is the experience. If there's no sense, you can't see anything. You wouldn't even know you were there. If there was nothing to see, to sense, you wouldn't even know you were there. You're invisible. Anyway, that's a side point.
Is that like you need the object to be able to see it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the direct witnessing of experience, which you're calling the senses, to abide there, it will transform. Experience of sensation will transform. But it's not for you to control that. It's for you to go with that. And essentially, you're going into an altered state, which will teach you about the nature of mind, which means the nature of your own consciousness. So, but if you're directly watching the senses, and suddenly the thought comes up, no, I'm looking for the thing that's looking. That's just another thought.
It's very tricky.
Very, very, very subtle, very tricky. Right, so that's a very specific problem with regards to meditation as to where you're at, which is fine. That's really good. That's a very deep question. I don't know how many people watching will have understood what we just talked about, but that's fine. We can put that stuff out too. That's for a real meditator, that kind of question. Somebody who's really trying to go into meditation. So you arrive at the senses. funny thing about the senses is they're not solid. I'm trying to think of a metaphor for it. I can give you a made-up metaphor. Imagine you live inside a house. The house is the body, the senses. And, you know, all the time you've been inside the house, you're looking at different parts of the walls and the house and the windows, and you're going around in the kitchen, and you go into the bedroom and the kids' bedroom, and you're just looking like this, checking everything, doing everything. It all seems very solid, very real, very dense. But suddenly one day you just get bloody fed up. You've had enough. Kids have been pissing you off. Husband non-stop farting all over the place. You've had enough. You're sitting down and you're not going to move. So you go and sit in your favourite armchair and you just stare at the wall. And all of a sudden, because your gaze has concentrated in on one spot, the wall starts to the atoms of the wall start to spread and actually shift and change. And you realise in that moment, it's not solid. It was only solid because your gaze was just darting around all over the place, and it seemed solid. But suddenly when you fully look at the wall and you stop paying attention to your farting husband and your annoying kids, all of a sudden you see through the damn wall. For the first time in your life, you see through the wall. Something similar takes place in deep meditation when you look directly at the senses. You think the senses are you, solid, as if that's where you stop. But anyway, I don't need to go too much into that. And it's not good really to give too much explanation on that. Just go into it yourself and see what happens, yeah? Mm-hmm. But that's where you get to. You've arrived at the senses, fantastic. That means you've sat the hell down and you've shut the hell up for the first time in your life. But now watch the wall of the senses directly. Don't expect anything to happen because that's deviating. That's your husband farting from the room down the road. I wish he'd stop bloody farting all the time. That's just you thinking again, you know.
And then you continue to watch them throughout the day as well.
Sure, why not?
Maintain your focus there.
Why not?
As much as possible.
Sure. And it's not necessarily try not to watch with expectation. Sometimes you hold yourself into a certain point because you're expecting the wall to dissolve, you know, don't go that way.
Yeah.
That's why teachers, people who speak, don't like to really give too many descriptions. Because, you know, I say this about the wall dissolving and a lot of meditators will go, okay, I want to sit down. I want the wall to dissolve, you know. That's just more thinking, more expectation. Let go of even that. Just watch. And so if you find that you're watching the senses and suddenly the experience internally shifts, let it shift. Don't grasp at the whatever you're watching and think, no, I've got to stay on this because it's supposed to be dissolving. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Just watch the inward experience and it'll shift and change and learn from it. It's teaching you about itself.
I had that the other day when I was laying out in the sun meditating, and I started to have the experience of seeing through my eyelids to see the clouds, and I kept doubting it and I kept doubting it. So I had to come back into the van, get like a blindfold, put it over my eyes so that I couldn't doubt it anymore. But then I laid back down and I was expecting it to happen and doubting that it would happen. And it just changed the whole vibe of my meditation.
So in that example, instead of just being able to be present with whatever is happening, the doubt causes you to try to control it or try to prove it. And by responding to that doubt, you now have lost it.
Yeah.
It's that experience has dissolved from you for now because you've grasped at it. It's like your actual grasping at it creates a barrier for it to happen. So the key with it all is no controlling. Watch what is happening. And be with whatever is happening with no expectation. Whatever is happening is life, you know, it's a part of your life. Whether it's some weird, altered, mystical state or just some very normal sense of relaxation and contentment. Go with it. Be with it. And at that point, you're watching life. And if you can sustain that watching, life will transform in the most wonderful ways that you cannot possibly imagine. Ones that defy description. And that vary. The difference between an ant hill and a mountain. And everything that could possibly be in between those two extreme states. Life can twist and transform in ways that you cannot possibly imagine. And you'll be there for all of it. And it will be you. And that's far beyond the world of the ego. So anyway, that's the world of deep kind of mystical meditation cultivation.
It can sometimes feel frustrating with meditation that because you're not having these grand spiritual experiences, like you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. But then you realize that throughout your day, you're stopping, you're becoming present, you're focusing on your senses, and you're doing that during like these intervals throughout the day, and you kind of forget that that's progress as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I guess the frustration of meditations.
So the error,
you feel like you're not getting anywhere.
Is in comparison. You know, you compare yourself to somebody else. That's the error, but it's also a normal error, because if you're learning about this stuff and you don't know how to do it, your instruction and your guidance is going to come from somebody else. So it's quite natural to kind of compare yourself to that person, or to, you know, you look at yourself and you say, okay, I'm this old, I've been meditating for a year or two, and that person who's actually younger, who's been meditating less than me, is actually talking about things that I haven't experienced. And so you get this kind of a comparison, but you don't know the consciousness that's operating there. You don't actually know how it's working. You don't know how old it is. You don't know how old that being is. You're not that person. You have not experienced what they have experienced. You also, because you're not too familiar with what delusion is and how it works, you don't know if what they're talking about is delusion. They might be chasing delusions in their experience, trying to grasp at certain states and have certain kinds of experience, thinking that that's enlightenment or that that's what it's all about, when it's not. But you won't know that because you're not experienced. So you just don't compare yourself. Don't go down the road of comparing yourself to other people or comparing other people to you. Just inquire into your own experience. How can you compare your own experience, really? This physical body occupies a space that will never, ever be that one.
Can't like merge them.
Right. This physical body and that one and its point of view is utterly unique to every other living being everywhere in the corner, throughout all corners of the universe. It has its own position, as does this one, as does that one, as does every single human being. So you can't compare yourself in reality. There is nothing to compare it to. Now, when you know that, because that's the truth, when you know that, you have much more respect for other people and their experience. And you know that their experience is their own. And the last thing you would want to do is try to impose on it or control it, or... You understand?
Yeah.
You are self-mastered, self-contained. This one, on its own. That one on its own. That one on its own. Self-mastered. And then if they're all operating that way, they're all operating the same way, which is where the synchronicities go through the roof, because they're actually all operating in the same space there, without any deviation from that space. That's where the oneness is realized. That's where the oneness is seen. So, it's a wonderful, lifelong, unanswerable, infinite exploration of life and what it is and what it can be and what it is producing and how it's evolving. And it's really wonderful. It's really fantastic. Challenging in many ways, but glorious. And so, yeah, I guess we just do this together, don't we? We share, we explore, and we inquire together. And we learn and we grow together from each other, through each other, with each other. And that's it. All right. Anything else we want to cover for this video?
Ryan, is there anything you'd like to ask or anything you want answered?
No, I had something before, but I've lost it.
All good.
All right. Then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching.
Goodbye for now.